Welcome to Trigger Talk, your place for everything first-person shooters, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and so much more. I'm your host, Sage Goodwin, and as always, I'm joined by Sammy Boy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Ready to talk some FPS today. And today, we're going to be talking about the XDefiant release date that we're pretty sure could be confirmed as early as, well, I'm not going to tell you right now. Got to stay in. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about the finals and how it kind of compares to XDefiant and how that might be the big Battlefield versus Call of Duty of the small-scale shooter. So, let's jump in. So, man, got some big news for me about XDefiant Season 0.
I do. They had the Ubisoft earnings call or earnings report. I'm not sure if it's an actual call like they do with EA, but anyway, they've gone into a little bit of depth on some games that are coming out in, what is it, Q3, even though it's weird the way that they do it, I think because of the fiscal year. So Q3 essentially means like Q1 of the year. Yeah. It's kind of backwards, isn't it? Like, or I guess it
some
makes
do
sense.
April, some do. I think Microsoft's is July. July is like their beginning of their fiscal year.
Yeah,
and then every other company does something different. It seems
it's weird to me. I don't know why they don't all just January should be the start of the year, but anyway, it doesn't
taxes.
It doesn't really matter at the end of the day because they've sort of outlined the games, or not even just games, but a lot of it's like DLC and stuff like that. That is going to be happening in those first 3 months. It just says from January till March, which I'd imagine means the end of March. And so on that list, we had XDefiant, and that all but confirms unless there is another delay, which I'd imagine, considering the initial delay, because that wasn't really something anyone expected. It already felt really good in all of the betas and stuff like that. So I don't think there'll be another delay, and it seems as though that pretty much confirms, unless something big happens, that the game will be launching before the end of March, which isn't really a surprise. I think I kind of guessed February, and it maybe now seems a bit too late. Like, I'd say now probably more March, unless they're going to announce something very soon.
I would be so surprised if we get it in Feb.
Yeah, I think when they announced that sort of delay, it would have been around October, maybe.
Which seems like a year ago.
Yeah, I think I guessed around Feb because I remember saying it's actually really smart of them to do that with Modern Warfare 3. I think that launched at the end of October or maybe the start of November, and that's their direct competitor because it is the most similar game to theirs, and it's kind of the game that they've not directly, but it's almost like the Pal World situation where like they are what Pal World is to Pokemon, they are to Call of Duty, pretty much in maybe a less egregious way, because like that game straight up just copies it. Whereas this is different. It uses their own IPs. It's got characters from games that, or not so much the characters, but the factions from games that they've made. So it's not a complete rip-off of Call of Duty, but it is definitely just trying to go for that sort of gameplay. And yeah, it makes sense for them to have delayed it until Modern Warfare 3's kind of died down. I did think that when the finals launched, I was like, damn, I think they may have though missed their window because the finals just kind of came in and took over for a little bit.
Yeah, that was like, oh gosh, that was laying down of the gauntlet almost.
Yeah.
So thinking back to that, it does make sense before like February, but I think considering what we've seen, considering the delays and the communications that we've seen around this game, it makes sense that they're going to try to push that as far out as possible.
Yeah.
And we just know it's going to be released before March 31st.
Yeah, which is probably around the time if I had to guess right now, I would probably say like sometime between March 15th and March 31st. Like that just kind of makes sense. I feel like games generally speaking drop in those like the 20th odd day of the month. Like that's just generally when all games seem to aim for. I'm not sure why that is, but
and typically games are, unless you're Nintendo, are Tuesday, right?
Yeah, usually
I think Nintendo's the only one that's Friday.
Yeah, I think they either do Tuesdays or Thursdays most games, I think, and it kind of just depends on what the game is, really. So, and look, maybe because it's a free game, they'll just have their own kind of like the finals, they just did whatever. Like they don't have as much of a. I think the release date doesn't matter as much for a free game, so it's going to be interesting to see. But it is just good to get some like. It's not necessarily confirmation because again they could delay it or whatever, but
yeah,
they wouldn't confidently say that. Like they actually would just say the game is coming out in 2024 if they weren't confident. So I'm almost 100% certain that it will be before then because yeah, they've said with other games in there, for example, Star Wars Outlaws, a lot of people saying that is not going to be late in the year. It's going to be like the first half of the year, but they just said 2024 because they are kind of leaving a bit of like wiggle room for that, and they obviously haven't done that with this game. So I'd be shocked at this point if we don't get it before the end of March.
Yeah, and with Star Wars Outlaws, like Star Wars as an IP is heavily regarded, and the expectations for that to do well is also very watched in the industry.
Yeah.
Speaking from like just analyst perspectives, like I don't think we're going to see any hard dates until like a trailer. Definitely not going to see it on like an analyst thing because as soon as they say one thing, the analysts are going to be looking at it and be like, okay, it's going to do well or it's going to do terrible, and they just don't want to set that up. XDefiant, on the other hand, it's like it's entering a market that Ubisoft has some entries in. If you look at like Rainbow Six Siege and the other shooters that they have there, that it stands out in other ways, but there is less likelihood that everyone's going to be like, how is XDefiant going to do and change the financials for Ubisoft?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's a weird one. It doesn't seem like a big launch for them, even though it actually could like be huge.
Oh, it could be massive
if it goes well and is monetized. Because that's the other thing, we don't really know the monetization side of it just yet. So yeah, it's going to be impossible to tell until it actually happens. But it could be like one of their biggest games of the year, just in the fact that any multiplayer shooter done well, and especially a free one, if it's monetized well, that's what makes money. We look at all the biggest games in the industry. Your biggest games are like Call of Duty and Fortnite and stuff like that, and that's because that is generally what tends to go well. So it's going to be interesting to see, and yeah, I just hope that they say something official about it now, which kind of feels like they will sometime soon, just because people are talking about it. It's been mentioned in the earnings call, so Mark Rubin already doing a good job with the communication. He just seems like the type of guy who would be like, all right, people are already talking about it and there's a lot of speculation like starting, so let me just say what I need to say, which is pretty much what drew me to the game in the first place, just the really solid communication.
And we haven't gotten any news since the update on September 11th around the XDefiant delay. I'm on their website now, at least officially from their website. That's what we've seen. Obviously, he's quite active on Twitter and the various platforms too, answering questions and all that kind of stuff. But so it's kind of crazy to think back to September, and that was kind of like the last official thing we heard was the delay. And now it's like, okay, we've put the effort in, we're bringing it up, let's start doing it. I think it's honestly a good time frame if I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I do think that, like I said, that's kind of, they've dodged Modern Warfare 3, which did really well at launch, but like it has, as expected, dropped off because it's Call of Duty. So they've now got a lot of people who are like, I really want that like shooter fix, and obviously the finals is there, but it is a very different game, and it's not really like going to steal Call of Duty players. So yeah, I think February and March is like a good time frame for them to have chosen, and hopefully like the game was already
like the summer period.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a good time of year for any game to launch, really. You look at last year, you had like Hogwarts Legacy, Jedi Survivor, and Tears of the Kingdom all drop in that sort of time period. So it's clearly a good time to all of those games. Like Hogwarts is the highest selling game of the year. Tears of the Kingdom was probably the second. I think it had like 20 million sales. And
yeah, Hogwarts Legacy dethroned GTA.
Yeah, which it's mad. Like how I never thought a game would overtake Call of Duty per year unless it is a Rockstar game, but they've managed to do it, which is it's exciting.
And it's a single player game with no online access.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a good period, and I just want some confirmation now. I'd love for them to just give. They've been very good with the communication to an extent. They haven't really. It's mostly just been Mark Rubin just saying like, here's why we had to delay it. Here's the stuff we're currently working on. Blah blah blah, and it's all really good. Some of that stuff doesn't need to be said. Not that I'm complaining about it, but it's more like if there's one thing people want to know in terms of transparency and communication, it's when is the game launching? Like that's really that's the only thing people care about. Once the game's out, then we can ask, all right, when's this other element coming? When's this new mechanic coming? That's fair enough, but people just really want to play the game in. So I just hope they say something official soon, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I'm honestly like, I haven't been keeping up with all of the like various changes, more so as like, okay, this sounds interesting. I haven't been like heavily invested, but in prepping for the podcast as well as the continued conversations that we've had on Trigger Talk so far, like I'm getting more and more hyped on this, probably even more so than any of like the final stuff that, because I was pretty hyped around this idea of like XDice people leaving and starting their own studio and doing something very different from anything else. I was pretty hyped about that. I felt like XDefiant was in a similar place, but like attacking it from a different area and be like, hey, let's do what Call of Duty would never do. Let's talk to our fan base. Let's see what they want. Let's look at the different things that are available to us with the technology that we have, the team that we have. Let's make the Call of Duty killer without having to say this is the Call of Duty killer. Like taking the core pieces of what people love from like classic Call of Duty and making it better, improving on that good formula that people have resonated with, and giving it the potential for something like something more and improved in a way that Call of Duty would never do.
Yeah, that's for me the most exciting part is that, and it's never going to reach like peak old school Call of Duty, but I miss that. I miss the feeling of like just having this purely casual shooter that you just jump on and there's no like, because I love the finals, but you've got to be like switched on to play it. You can't really just jump in and, well, I mean you can, but you're not going to do as well. Whereas in XDefiant, you can just jump into that game and just like muck around for a while. And I'm excited for that. And just the fact that they are so like just the opposite of what Call of Duty is, where they just don't listen to what people want because they're very stubborn in that sense, and they just go like we know what needs to be done, so we're going to do that. This is the complete opposite. They're literally just like, we heard you don't like SBMM, we're going to just remove it from this game, and that's like the selling point of the game, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and they can do that because they're small and they're new.
Yeah, exactly. Like that part of it is very exciting to me, so I'm very keen to get my hands on it, and yeah, I'm just interested to see how it goes. I don't know if it will be successful or not. I think the fact that it's free should mean it will be pretty decent, but yeah, it's impossible to tell.
Yeah, we'll see about like like you said, it's going to be free, so a lot of people are going to be interested in it from that perspective. But how many people are going to actually take a look and stay? That's the big question that we all have. Exactly, yeah.
I think it'll definitely it'll pique a lot of people's interest at launch. It's just the staying power and what they've got planned is the only part that I wouldn't say concerns me more. Just like I'm just curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, it's a big question, and it's like after all the hype, after all of the back and forth from the community, like if it sucks,
yeah,
that's just gonna suck.
Yeah, they need to, and that's kind of why I was fine with the delay, because they do need to launch it very well. It can't have, if it just suffers right away, it'll die like almost immediately. So it needs to do what the finals has done, where it's like people were actually kind of like, damn, this game's like really good, and it's hooked people in there. It needs that same situation, which I'm not as confident with that as the finals. I think the finals has got a more unique, I think because it's not just like kind of copying Call of Duty, it's got its own thing that's a bit more of a hook for people. But yeah, again, people just want that casual game to play in, so hopefully it can scratch that itch a little bit.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the finals, I do want to talk about it because I feel like the finals in XDefiant have inadvertently been in the same conversations for a lot of people. It's a free-to-play shooter. It's an arena shooter, very similar as well. But I want to talk about how, like, it's, in my mind, they're very similar in the idea of, like, when I think about XDefiant, I also think about the finals. Do you see them as competitive in any way? Like, what do you think the differences are on that stuff?
It's hard to say. I think, like, realistically, any shooter is going to be competitive with the other shooters, but I think that it's almost like a bigger gap even between, say, Call of Duty and Battlefield, where they're very different types of games, but they do still somewhat compete against each other. But I think with XDefiant and the finals, they are different enough that they shouldn't really have to worry about each other. At least, say, for me, I think that I can manage to play both and not feel like I need to, like, stick to one.
Yeah.
So it just depends whether everyone else feels that way. Because, like, obviously if people are going from the finals to XDefiant, then I guess that is direct competition. But yeah, I just think they're different enough that it hopefully they should both have a place there. It's just depending on how long they stick around for, I guess, is the main concern. Because even the finals has dropped off a little bit. It's still doing pretty well, but it went from pretty massive numbers at launch to, like, now it's around the, like, 50 to 30,000 concurrent players, which is not anything spectacular. It's still in the top, say, 25 on Steam, I think, but that's also not, it's not blowing anything away. So that's the only concern with these smaller games, is that they do need to make their money, and if they don't have the staying power, they won't make the money because they're free. That's the only issue. At least if that's like Call of Duty, if people drop off, that sucks for them, but they spent $70 to get it, so they've made their money.
Yeah, and there's going to be another one in a year.
Yeah, exactly. So,
or by the time that they get bored with it, probably 6 months.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting time for the shooter space, just because of that whole the whole free-to-play element is definitely a bit of a switch up in that. If these games don't do well, like do really well for a year, they can actually still be considered a bust by the company who's published them, even though to us we might be like, holy, that that was a really good game, but they might see them as a failure still. So
do you think that there's like a cap or a ceiling on how many free-to-play shooters there can be? Like, do you think that's going to be an issue that we're going to run into here soon?
I guess so, yeah. I think, for example, when it was just Fortnite, really, for a while there. PUBG was paid at that time. So Fortnite kind of stole the space because it was free. But now
it was definitely riding on that beta bandwagon too early on, where like they were able to skirt a lot of like the review process because it was beta.
Yeah. So I do. That's a good question. I do think that there can be too many. And I do think if at least too many like mid-tier ones, as in, I think if your game is free, it's allowed to be a little bit worse, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to say that it should be bad, but like if you've got a game that is full price, I think people expect that to be an 8 out of 10 minimum, and if it's below that, people get kind of annoyed. If something's a 7 and they've paid full price for it, people kind of go, oh, like I wanted that to be better. I wanted to feel like my money was worth it. If it's free, I feel like people can be okay with it being like a 6 or a 7 if they're just getting fun out of it. Because I think when something's free, there's almost no expectation of it. It's like if it's free and it sucks, oh well, I'll just delete it. So, yeah, I think that's the only downside to free shooters is that they often aren't quite, top tier games. Even I would say the finals, I think that game is fantastic, but if it was a full price game, I'd probably then be a little bit more critical of it because I've paid for it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so the issue with that is that there is going to be, it's kind of like a saturated market of these free games that are all, not to say they're all mid-tier, they're all pretty decent, but like if they're all just like 7 or 8s out of 10 and they're free, that can become too saturated, I think. And at least then there might just be that one that's like a 10 out of 10 free game, and then all the other ones suffer from that because it's like, well, why would I play these 7 out of 10s if there's a 10 out of 10 and they're all free? I may as well play the better one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think there can be too many, but I'm not sure we're quite there yet. But it could come up on us pretty quickly, I guess, because that it does become, or it does seem as though that is becoming the trend at the moment to make these free shooters. Like I honestly wouldn't even be, I don't think it will happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if Battlefield, the next one, was free and they really try to monetize it well, because EA has shown that they're okay doing that with like games like Apex and stuff. So yeah, not to say I think
Apex has got to be like the freaking moneymaker when it comes to online, right? Like,
yeah,
obviously you have the big boys like Sims is always there. You have sports games, clearly big money there. But like when it comes to shooters, like Apex is king, right? Like that was we talked about this probably years ago at this point, around how it's crazy to think that one, they just shadow dropped Apex. But also within that same first year, it was already in the like earnings report.
Yeah,
like,
it was their biggest, behind FIFA, it was their biggest game. Like that's mental. And not only did they shadow drop it, they didn't even say with the finals, they shadow dropped that, but we knew about it. We didn't know anything about, like, Apex just got its announcement as it launched. Like, I've still never seen anything
aware of
like
it as
that.
an entire thing.
Yeah, like imagine seeing the trailer for the next Battlefield game, and we're like, oh damn, new Battlefield, and then at the end they're like, it is currently out for free. Like,
yeah,
that's just mental. I've never seen anything like that. So yeah, I don't know. It's the shooter space is very interesting in that sense that I think a lot of companies are almost going to have their hands forced to go free to play just to get the people through the door. Because realistically, why would I pay, whatever it's going to cost if there's all these other shooters for free? Why would I buy this new shooter that's coming out when, I'll just go play the finals instead. Like I just don't have that money. I'll just do something else with it. And so these people are then thinking, we have to get people playing the game. So if we make it free and still monetize it, we can still make money. And at least it's almost a more guaranteed way to get people in the door. And as long as it's monetized well, then it can still do, we've seen it, it can still do arguably better than the paid games. Like Fortnite earns freaking billions and it's free. So yeah, I just think that's kind of the way that the shooter genre is going. I don't think Call of Duty will ever get there, and so I don't think it'll ever be like a necessity for games to be free. But
yeah,
I definitely think we're seeing it. Like the finals and XDefiant are two prime examples. I don't know, but wasn't Valorant free? I remember playing it at launch. I didn't pay for it unless it's gone paid since then, unless that was like early access. But
no, I think it's free. I always forget about Valorant, but it's still massive.
Yeah. And so
yeah, it's free to play.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. That is the current thing. And not that that's necessarily that new, but I just think that is the way that the shooter genre will go. So yeah, I do hope it doesn't get too saturated, because Like, that's the last thing I want is that we all finally get free games, and then it's like, oh damn, they all suck anyway. So now I have to go pay for the other one.
I think it's interesting to look at. There's a similar idea going on with streaming services right now. Like Netflix is here to stay, unfortunately. Like it's there. They can continue to raise the price. It is, honestly. Like that is a great analogy. They're going to keep on doing the same thing. They're going to launch cool shows and then they'll cancel them after one season. That's first place. And then everyone else in the entire streaming service industry is looking to be second place. And I feel like we're going to get into a situation with free games that's like that, where you, as a free game, like, and we've talked about this before, the first Call of Duty game I ever bought was because of Warzone. And I feel like that's going to be a piece that a lot of studios are going to look at. They're going to say, hey, we have this established franchise. Maybe sales are a little bit dwindling. Maybe they haven't been performing as well as we want them to, like Battlefield has. What are some ways to get people into the door, but have that be representative of the full game experience? And maybe we get people from that free game to that paid game. Like I still continue to play Warzone, but also I would hop in like maybe once a week to play Call of Duty, like the real game. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's pretty standard. I know a lot of other people that were like not interested in Call of Duty as a game really. They knew about it, but didn't really like hop into it until Warzone happened.
Yeah. I got a lot of mates who weren't even gamers. Like we play Warzone and FIFA and stuff now almost weekly, and they like didn't own consoles. Like they literally just didn't. They were not into that sort of thing. They just lived their own little life. I don't know what the hell people do if you don't have a console, to be honest, but they just did their own thing.
Have a social life? That sounds weird.
And then when COVID hit, because we all knew we were going to be locked down, they were like, oh damn it, like I may as well just go buy a PlayStation, like I'm going to have not much else to do. And then we started playing Warzone, and because it was free, and they have then since bought every Call of Duty. So that's like in those 4 years, that's $400 they've spent on Call of Duty when they would have spent $0 on it. So it definitely works. And even for me, like I, within Warzone, was buying skins and stuff because it's like I played this game so much. I loved it. Damn, there's this awesome new skin. You know what? I've got the game for free. Let me spend $10 on that skin. That's pretty cool. Do that a few times and you do it 5 times over the span of a year. And it gets you into that mindset of like, well, the game was free, so I can kind of justify buying this skin because it's like, well, I didn't pay for the game, so yeah, what's $10? And you do that a few times, still getting the game for cheaper than you would pay for it. But at the time, I wasn't playing Call of Duty. I was so sick of the old ones that they never would have got that money. But because of Warzone, it got me in there, and then I'm spending money on Call of Duty again. So it clearly works. I do think it is the way to go. I think at this point, maybe not for like single player games and stuff, because it's hard to monetize those, but I genuinely think multiplayer games should be free at this point. I think that is the way for them to go, because you'll get way more people in the door. And if you just make sure that the game is good, that's the big issue with it, is that like, if the game sucks, that's an astronomical loss for that company, because like they're making $0 from that. You know what I mean? Like they might spend $200 million on it and make like a couple $100,000 off it because people are like, wow, this is terrible. Some people are still going to buy some skins and that, but like most people are going to be like, no. Like look at Suicide Squad. If that was if they launched that free, you would have got a lot of people in there, but most people would be like, damn, this game is terrible. And they wouldn't have bought any skins and stuff. And then that game would have just they would have sunk them completely. Yeah. So it does come with a big risk.
Because it definitely isn't already doing that.
I mean, yeah, it has sunk them as it is. So yeah.
At least they made some money on the people that tried it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, that is the risk of it. And that's the same thing with XDefiant. It could just not do well, and I don't know what their budget for that game would be, but like we look at a game like Spider-Man, which it would have a huge budget compared to a lot of games. It budgeted itself at like, I think $315 million, and it made $350 million despite being one of the fastest selling and biggest selling PlayStation games ever. It made about $50 million in total, like, which is a lot of money, but for spending 315 on the budget.
And more than likely, I doubt that's including marketing. So
yeah, that's probably the budget for the actual development. Yeah, so they may have borderline made a loss on one of their best games ever. You know what I mean? So for a game like XDefiant, I don't imagine the budget would be that big at all. But like, I don't know, even if it's a third of that, 100 million, and then no one spends money on the skins, well, Ubisoft has just lost $100 million. So there is the risk of it, but I just think that is, as it always goes back to on this podcast, if you just make sure that the game you're making is good, then a lot of these issues go away. That is the key thing to making games. Just make sure they're good. The money will come after that. And I really do hope that's the case for both the finals and XDefiant. I want that to be the new thing going forward, is free games that if you can prove to me the game's good, I'll gladly spend money on it. When you do like a Call of Duty where you don't really know if it's going to be good and you have to spend $70 to hope it's good, that's kind of scary. So I want these games to succeed, and we're just going to have to wait. It's really going to be like a waiting game for the next probably 2 years to be able to tell if they pay off or not.
Yeah, and it's a really nuanced conversation because as a gamer, you don't want to spend a whole lot of money. Games are getting more expensive to make. They're also getting more expensive to buy. Yes, inflation and blah, blah, blah. The games haven't raised their prices in 12 years, blah, blah, blah. That's true. But also, like, everything else has gotten more expensive. More people are less likely to take a chance at $70 on a game unless they know it's great. But on the flip side, I feel like free-to-play games have destroyed the quality of a lot of these games. On that same note, because like the studios themselves, they don't necessarily know. They're guessing. They're making a lot of decisions based on statistics and analytics and all that stuff on like, hopefully they have a good strategy for this game to make money once it's launched. They aren't going to make money off of the game itself. They're going to make it on skins. So hopefully they have a product that's going to make people want to buy skins. Therefore, they have to deprioritize how much money they put in the first place to make it more financially viable. But that also typically lends itself to be less quality because games are expensive.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword there that I do. As much as I'm for the free games with the battle pass and stuff, I also would equally say that like battle passes and like Fortnite and FIFA have like ruined gaming a bit, to be honest. Like I almost think exclusively FIFA and Fortnite have been so, not them themselves, but like what they've done to the industry has been so
what they
destructive.
represent.
Yeah, like the whole like Ultimate Team in FIFA, that now every game just wants that. And so all these big, or not even the developers, just the investors and stuff, they go, why can't you make that? So go and do that. Look at Suicide Squad. It's a live service, like co-op shooter when it should not be that. It's Suicide Squad. They don't all use guns and stuff, but no, it's a shooter. They're all carrying guns. It's all a live service thing. Because Warner Brothers has seen what those other games do and go, we want that amount of income. Like they can do it.
They looked at a spreadsheet of all of the games that Warner Brothers Games produces as a publisher, and they found a gap, and they found a studio that was making something that could feasibly make that gapped game. That's how Suicide Squad happened, more than likely. We don't know for sure if that happened, but considering the quality and the freaking 180-degree shift from what Rocksteady was known as to what they produce now,
the fact that
you have to assume
the OG devs from Rocksteady left and made their own studio is I just think that's confirmation.
And the founders of the studio left.
I think that they would have got essentially hassled by Warner Brothers to say, like, this is what we, like, you are making this game. And I just think those people would have said, you know what, we're not, like, I'm not doing that. And unfortunately, the rest of the company got stuck with it. And here we are. And ironically, Warner Brothers released this other tiny little game last year called Hogwarts Legacy. Single player game, no online nonsense.
Hey man, didn't you hear single player games are dead?
It's funny, like I bet Warner Brothers made the decision, because obviously that would have been years ago that they they locked in Suicide Squad. I bet come like
8 years of development time, right? That's what it was like rumored as.
I bet that they looked at Hogwarts last year, and they were like cheering it on, and they're like, "Oh my god, this is so great!" And then they went, "Oh damn it, we remember that Suicide Squad game? Oh, we made that a live service. What are we doing?" So it's funny. It makes me funny when I hate that the developers have to go through that. I feel bad for everyone at Rocksteady and stuff, but like, it makes me very happy that those higher ups at Warner Brothers and stuff would be, I don't want to say suffering, because like Harry Potter,
they're definitely not suffering from their freaking $1 million mansion or whatever.
Yeah, but I hope that I hope it was enough of a like kick in the teeth of like, oh damn, we maybe don't know everything about this industry because we just know about business. We don't know about what we are actually doing in our business. So yeah, it's just funny to me that essentially the two most polarizing games of, say, the same 12 months, because they're obviously different years, but Feb last year to Feb this year, the two most polarizing games, one was a huge success that was a single player game that was just what we all want. I just want to get lost in Hogwarts and have fun. And the other game was the one that they tried to make their money on. It's just the biggest L I've seen in I don't know how long, probably since the Avengers game, I'd say. And I think it's a bigger L than that, which is, I never thought I'd really say that.
Yeah. I just do want to remind everybody, when we do criticize game studios, we do not criticize the individual developers ever. You guys are doing your job. You're going through like hell right now. Yeah. It is honestly a terrible time to be a game developer. Most of you game developers are in it for the love, or got into it from the love of video games. We are questioning the business decisions before any of you guys touch a computer or anything like that.
That's my issue with this whole industry, is that it's run by people who don't care about it or know about it. The people who develop the games, you get paid fairly well to be a dev.
Bob Igers of like, guys, these electronic video game systems produce large quantities of income. We should probably do some more of these electronic video games.
Yeah. Like, I just wish that they would all just keep their hands off it and just let the people, like, I want these devs to be the higher ups. I just want the person in the company who is the
we
best
need to clone
running
Vince
the company.
Zampella, and
like,
then just put him in a lot of various situations.
That is the prime example of the people I want running these studios. The people like Vince, who, of course, he's a good businessman too. It's not like he's just dumb at business, but he first and foremost understands games. He understands what does well. He understands what people want. He actually cares. He's passionate about it. You can see how much influence he's had in other games, like in all the games he sort of handles, that he's not just saying like, yep, go do this. He actually cares enough. Like we saw it. We even saw it in the like Fallen Order behind the scenes little documentary that they did. Like he was in that. Yeah. He didn't need to be involved in that game. They had Stig at the helm. He didn't need to be there, but he was. He's passionate. He wants the game to do well. He wants it to be on the right track. And that's what every company needs. They need those people, at least to be the buffer between the investors and the pure businessmen that just have zero understanding of the industry. Yeah, we do still need those people in here, unfortunately, because they bring the money to afford it. But we need people to just say to them, like, like they shouldn't have the final say. They should say, why don't you guys go make this game? And someone like Vince says, no, I'm not. Like, I'm telling you right now, we are not making that game. Like he did with the whole like bounty hunter one. And he was like, we are making Jedi Fallen Order. That is what we will offer to you. If you say no to that, well, good luck. We'll go do something else. That's the type of people we need, because someone needs to stand up to those people and then look at what that has resulted in. The franchise has done very well. EA is now like back in kind of the good graces with Star Wars, not so much after Battlefront, but like I think they've earned a bit of trust back that we now, when the next Jedi game comes out, we're all going to be excited for that. We know that franchise is good. So yeah, that's to me the main issue with this whole thing, is that there's not enough people like Vince, which I'm sure it's hard to stand up to the investors and tell the people paying for all of your jobs to like what needs to happen. I'm sure that's not an easy conversation, but like the downside of it is if you don't have that conversation, your game's going to suck, and then you're all going to get laid off anyway. So you got to do it at some point. And yeah, it's frustrating to see. And I do feel, like you said, almost never do I actually criticize the actual developers. I think pretty much 99% of developers just want to make good games. That's why they got into the industry. And even if a game isn't necessarily that good, it's not even often their fault. It's the fault of the people higher up. Like
games are massive. One single developer isn't going to have. Exactly. Typically, they aren't going to have as much impact as you ranting on Twitter at them will think they do.
Yeah. Like people think that like one person is in charge of like the story for
this UI is bad. I'm going to talk to this one person that does UI in the company. It's like, no, that doesn't work like that.
And again, even then,
unless it's an indie,
the UI like team still has to submit that to the higher up, who goes, yeah, like that all works and everything. So even then,
they may not like the color purple, but and the team chooses purple, and they're like, nope, sorry, buddy.
Exactly.
It's not going to work.
There's so many layers that it has to go through that it just, you can almost never blame it on the actual developers. It's generally speaking, those decisions are being made by essentially the wrong people. It's the investors, or oftentimes you'll get like, it can be someone who was a developer and they're not maybe that good at managing people, and they become like a manager of that company.
Yeah.
To where it's, again, not even their fault. They've probably been put in the wrong role by someone, but they're in charge of the whole team.
And that's a problem industry-wide. It's in tech as well, where the only way to go from an entry-level position, or even not an entry-level position, to further up in the ranks, a lot of people that are managers were typically there because that was the only way to advance in the company. And they may not want to be a manager, but that's the only option for them to progress their career. So that's the thing that they have to do.
And so, instead of using their talent, they're really good at like level design. So they become the level design team leader, and they're actually no longer really developing it. They're just overseeing and like kind of telling people what to do, which they might not be good at. Not everyone is good at managing people. Yeah. And so therefore you get someone who's really good at their job, what they used to do, managing a bunch of other people who are good at their job, but the guy isn't actually that good at managing, which again is probably not his fault. He didn't want to become a manager. That's just the next promotion to get. So then he's not good at managing those people at their jobs, and then therefore that's where all the mistakes start to happen, and the whole level design team fails because of not even that guy. It's like whoever promoted him or whoever made those roles in the company. Yeah. Like didn't know what they were doing, because you often need to hire a manager who has credentials in the management role, you know? Like you can't hire like a developer and expect, sometimes they can be great at managing, but sometimes they're not. And so it's almost never the actual developer's fault. It's just, it's annoying because they get all the flack for it. And even then, like even sometimes inadvertently you'll criticize the dev team. Like we often will say about how poorly DICE has done this or that, and it comes across like we're having a go at DICE individually, when it's really not. It's like the couple of higher ups at DICE and then EA as a whole, but we just accidentally say DICE because we're just used to. And yeah, so I feel for them. I would not want to be a game dev. I used to actually really want to, and honestly, I couldn't think of anything worse right now. Like, it'd be the worst job. So much fear of losing your job. Too much politics involved in it that, like we just said with promotions and stuff, you might have to go to a role you don't want. Just a million things wrong in that industry, and they all just got in there because they just like games, man. They just want to make fun games for people to play. And unfortunately, a lot of them end up not being able to do that because of someone else's downfalls.
Yeah. Yeah, it's... As always, we want to make sure when we say DICE, it's not like you specific DICE developer. It's the system as a whole. It's not just like you person at DICE who's doing their job. I think it's going to be interesting to see where the first-person shooter industry moves forward, and I think a lot of these smaller games are going to be very fun to watch, see how they do, see what the industry as a whole does. But let us know your thoughts on what we covered today in the comments below if you're watching this on YouTube, or contact@uplinkpodcast.com. Would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. As always, check out Sammy Boy's channels, and if you're into Star Wars, we also do a Star Wars podcast called Star Wars Uplink, which you can check out in the description. And as always, we'll see you later, video gamers. Every time.